Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Engaged Buddhist Workshop. Thank you for being part of Sangha Ocean Beach today. I'm Brother Dave. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome. Mm. So I see some of you still settling in, and that's exactly what this time is for. Let's not blow through the stop sign to get to the yoga class on time. We're going to be together for a few hours today. So make sure your space is comfortable and that your technology is behaving as best as you can get it to. So I'd like to start our time together today with gratitude. As a disciple of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, as many of us are here together today, and many more who will be watching this recording. So thank you for practicing together to support others' practice. When we share this recording, question and answers in the common space when we're all together like this will be recorded and shared so that we can help other people practice during these troubling times. The time we spend in breakout rooms and small groups will not be recorded and will be private. So we can have that kind of experience as well. So thank you. Thich Nhat Hanh is very clear that when we look at the three jewels of Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the Buddha meaning, of course, our own Buddha nature, our own ability to become ever increasingly more awake. The Dharma meaning the teachings, the path of following those teachings, and the entire cosmos in which that drama plays out. And the Sangha, meaning the beloved community, the family that we practice together with. Our teacher, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, has been very clear that the Sangha is the most important of those three jewels. That if we want our practice to be the most beautiful, the most powerful, the most efficacious, then we're invited to practice in community, to practice as a Sangha. And so I know in my life that when I wade into these challenging, sometimes daunting times of wanting to really apply the practice in the real world, right? When I want to get up off my cushion, and I'm sitting on a meditation cushion right now, and sometimes I want to get up off it and continue the practice, then I get scared and I get overwhelmed. And Thai has been very clear that the best medicine for that is to practice with community, to give ourselves that support. And so, as a student, that means I need community. I cannot do this by myself, not maximally, right? Not as my teacher invites me to. And so, I'd like to start today with gratitude, because by coming here today and by practicing together, you're allowing all of us, yourself included, to experience Sangha, to experience the beloved community. I like to translate the old Sanskrit word of Sangha as just family. Right? Because if I regularly sit like this with people and share what's really on my heart and talk in a frank and candid way about how I am trying to practice to keep my actions, thoughts, and speech connected to my heart, well, those people become family. I can't go there with you and then afterwards feel like you are a stranger to me. And so thank you, friends. I appreciate your practice. We do it together. So now I'd like to introduce my friend and mentor and teacher, Mary Myers. Hi, Mary.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm here as an assistant.
Oh, Mary is one of the people that introduced me to the teachings of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh like 20 years ago. I was,
24 years ago. Sorry, my
yeah.
my brain's like, that's a wrong number.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Thank you for being here in moral and practice and technical support, Mary. And if anybody has any problems with their tech at any point during the workshop, just shoot it into the chat, which Mary will be keeping an eye on, and she'll help you out. She's also going to be sending us into our breakout rooms when we do small group activities, and letting you know via text or with her voice, like when the time is up or when it's time for the next person in the group to speak. So thank you, Mary. We're so happy you're here.
My great pleasure, Dave. And truly, it's an honor. I'm really mostly here for my nourishment and for the support of Sangha, but because it nourishes me to work with you, I want to be very clear. So thank you.
I love you too. uh, so we're going to break our time up together into 3 blocks. In the first hour-ish, we're going to talk about how we got here, right? Because if you're anything like me and you're looking around at the room, at the world, you're probably someplace in this quote that I love by the singer John Lennon. And he said, "It seems to me that the world is being run by insane people with insane objectives." And I remember when I first heard that, I was watching some old interview with him. And I was like, okay, yes, that checks, that tracks. That is how I feel right now. And so, like yourself, I've been looking into the teachings and practices of mindfulness for some answers, like some context. How did we get here, and what is this? Why is this happening? And of course, because the world is like this, right? The world is this kind of roller coaster. We're experiencing, genocides and fascism and racism and classism and on and on and on, right? We're experiencing the horrors and the tragedies of our day. But if we were to talk to people 100 years ago, they'd be telling their tale, right? If we were to talk to people in the late 1800s, they'd be talking about the robber barons and the Gilded Age and how a very few took possession of and control of almost everything. Like this is it, right? And if we were talking to people hundreds of years before that, they'd be talking about kings and queens and the beginnings of what we now call imperial colonization. And so the first thing I want to do in our first hour together is just take a step back and look at this picture that we're inside of from a 10,000 foot place. I'm going to talk a little bit about the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, and in the first hour, a fair bit about the teachings of a Buddhist thinker named David Loy, who's done a lot of work on unpacking, how our world came to look the way it looks based on how our brains work and how society works from the standpoint of Buddhist psychology and Buddhist sociology. Then in our second hour, I want us to take a deep dive into the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh himself, who coined the phrase engaged Buddhism. Thai passed away a couple of years ago, but while he was alive for 96 years, 80 years of which he was a monastic, 80 years of which he was a monk, he just gave his entire life's energy, right? He burned his entire candle for the promotion of peace in our world. So his entire life is a teaching for us, is a glowing example of how we can take our internal Buddhist practice, our internal mindfulness, if you don't connect with the word Buddhist, because it's not important. Our internal mindfulness, I define mindfulness as paying attention with love. I like to define it that simply. Mindfulness is paying attention with love. And so the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh spent his entire life paying attention to himself and the world around him and all of us in it with love. With love. Not in a clinical way, not in a judgmental way, not in a this is bad and I've got to fix it way, but in a very loving way. So in our second hour together, I want to go a little deeper into that and what that means and what he taught us, what he learned from his war-torn life in Vietnam in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, French occupation, American Vietnamese conflict, and so forth. We're going to be taking like 10-minute breaks in between these blocks too, so that we can all, stretch our legs and not lose our minds. Mindfully snack. I have some tea here with me right now. Delicious. And then in our third hour together, we're going to get boots on the ground, right? We're coming down from 10,000 to 5,000. And the final hour, it's boots on the ground. Like, what can we actually do? Not what did Thich Nhat Hanh do? Not what can everybody do? But what can I do today to be part of the solution and less part of the problem, right? For the state of the world as I see it and as I'm experiencing it. So thanks so much for being here. I'm so excited. As we do in Zen, we're very clear about the fact that Zen is not a collection of ideas. And even though we're going to traffic in a lot of words and a lot of concepts today, Zen is a practice of doing. Zen is much more a push-up than a haiku, than an esoteric something. And so we're going to do a bunch of push-ups today. We're going to meditate together 3 times, including one right now. So please take your comfortable seat. For me, that means I usually, as you see me doing, wiggle around a little bit, right? Because I want to avoid the temptation to become a Buddha statue on the cover of Shambhala magazine, right? I don't want to be posing. So I have to move around and listen to my body as it exists today. And I might need an extra blanket. I might need a pillow behind me. I might be very tired and need to lie down. And I have to check in with myself first and make that determination every time I practice. And then on its own, right? Those investigations, that listening, right? The key word, that listening, right? Starts to settle the snow globe, right? There's nothing wrong with the shaken up snow globe. The shaken up snow globe is beautiful. It's designed to be shaken up and to be observed and enjoyed and appreciated in its chaos. There's nothing wrong with that. But then sometimes it's nice to set the snow globe down and to just let it settle. And to appreciate its beauty in that state, the clarity in that state. And so very naturally, my body, even to some extent my breathing, just starts to settle on its own, just because I'm not stirring the pot. Then I check in with the front of my body, my abdomen, my hands at rest before me, the muscles in my face and jaw. And I just check in with the front of my body and I try to relax it as much as is available to me. It's more of an invitation than a forcing, right? I try to invite the front of my body to soften. I check in with any tension I might be holding in my abdomen. In the muscles around my eyes. This soft front is a physical reminder to me that whatever happens, whatever reality sends through my sense doors, I want to meet it with a soft front. I want to meet it with an open heart. I want to meet it with acceptance. I want to pay attention to it with love. But if I only soften my front, if I say yes and embrace everything that comes, I'll get bowled over. I'll get overwhelmed. I'll get burned out. And so I have to balance this soft front with a strong back. And I have to take care of myself. I have to be well rested and well fed and well hydrated. And so it's this combination of a soft front and a strong back that keep me in my balance, that allow me to be simultaneously inclusive and powerfully equanimous, balanced. So invite your physical posture to steer your mind in the direction you want it to go. This period of meditation will be guided. It'll be less than 10 minutes long. It'll begin with one sound of the bell and end with two sounds. The only rule is be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You're not a statue. You're a beautiful human being. Listen to yourself, but gently. Breathing in, I am aware that I have a body. Breathing out, I smile in gratitude for my body and everything it makes possible for me. In, aware body. Out, gratitude. Breathing in, I'm aware of my breath. Breathing out, I smile in gratitude for my life-giving breath. In, aware of breath. Out, gratitude. Breathing in, I am aware of my feelings. I am not here without strong feelings about the world. Breathing out, I am so grateful for my feelings. They empower me. They clarify things for me. In, aware of feelings. Out, gratitude. Breathing in, I am aware of my thoughts. The endless stream of words. Breathing out, I am grateful for my thoughts. Sometimes they are helpful. In, aware of thoughts. Out, gratitude. Breathing in, we have arrived. Breathing out, we are home, together in our practice, in the moment, in the now. In, arrived. Out, home. Thank you, friends. Feel free to stretch out and unwind and massage yourselves. For those of you that might be newer to the practice and the tradition of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, it's this funny mix, right? Of like, our teacher is a Zen Buddhist master and a Buddhist monk. And so it has this kind of religious facade, even though when asked, what is Buddhism? The Dalai Lama in all his colorful robes says, it's a science of the mind, and says nothing about worship or religion. But still, right, I'm wearing this brown jacket that signifies I'm a disciple of Thich Nhat Hanh. Like, it has a kind of a religious flavor sometimes. The bells, the bowing. But I just want to remind myself and all of us that what we're doing is a very secular practice, right? What we're doing is brain training. Right? We're practicing a science of the mind. And so when the bell is invited, that's just a tool to help me take a step back from my racing thoughts and roller coaster of feelings and to come back into something very tangibly now. When I bow, sure, there's an element of respect and love in a bow, but it's also a practice, right? I'm bringing one hand representing my body and another hand representing my mind, and I'm bringing them together in the present moment. It's a practice tool. It's a practice tool. So, feel free to not bow, but I want you to know why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it out of some worshipful ritual, right? It's a practice. It's a push-up. And every time I bring my hands together, I am bringing myself together into the present moment with you. Every time I invite the bell, I am bringing myself into the present moment with you. Just so you know. So we could do an entire workshop, and maybe someday will, on the teachings of the Buddhist thinker David Loy. He wrote an incredible book called Money, War, Sex, Karma, in which he explains this beautiful lens that he is looking at our world through. 2,600 years ago, when maybe a prince named Siddhartha Gautama lived and was later given the title Buddha, awakened one, right? That might have happened. We don't know. But 2,600 years ago, when that might have taken place, things were simpler than they are now, right? Everybody wasn't walking around with a supercomputer in their pocket. I didn't have the capacity to know the suffering of a billion people on the other side of the planet. And so when the teachers of that time were looking at the suffering, the dukkha, which means the persistent dissatisfaction of human beings, it was easier to understand than it is now. Because you were just looking at another human being, right? You weren't looking at a screen that gave you a distorted view of billions of other humans, right? You were looking across a 3D space at another human animal, and you were experiencing the consequences of their built-in, hardwired, biological and psychological persistent dissatisfaction. The first of the Four Noble Truths that summarize the teachings of mindfulness. No matter how much I eat today, I will be hungry again. No matter how much I sleep tonight, I will fall tired again. No matter how delicious the cake is, I'm still going to experience a tinge of sadness as I approach the last bite. I am designed, we are designed to be perennially dissatisfied. Our brains are negatively oriented, negatively biased, as some people say, as Western psychology would say, as neurobiology would say. And that negativity bias has me always seeking the problem. And guess what? There's always a problem to find. No surprise. right? If things get too good and I start having too amazing a time and too many things start falling into place and I feel too much satisfaction, well, I can always reflect on my mortality and that all of those good things are destined to end. The Japanese Zen master who came to the United States in the 1950s and founded the San Francisco Zen Center, Master Shunryu Suzuki, liked to say to his students, life is like getting on a boat and sailing out to sea to sink. And the terse clarity of that summary, reminds me that I'm always going to be a little bit to a lot dissatisfied. I'm never going to get it all. That's not how this works. So, thousands of years ago, when we looked at other people, we could see the symptoms of this perennial dissatisfaction. We could see them in what are classically called the three poisons. And the three poisons are greed, ill will, and delusion. The teacher David Loy helps me to see that maybe thousands of years ago, these poisons existed in individuals. And so you'd have to like deal with the greedy neighbor or the ill will of some authority figure. But now, because of the way our society has interconnected so many of us economically and socio-politically and technologically, it's no longer a single human that's being greedy, and we just have to figure out, like, how can we convince this person to be less greedy so we can all live more happily and more harmoniously, right? Now, this greed that lives in all of our hearts, this ill will that lives in all of our hearts, this delusion that we are all vulnerable to as limited human beings, has taken on a life of its own, has become, as David Loy would say, institutionalized. And so what he means by that is that it's no longer one person that's making weird decisions and causing us all economic suffering and instability, as one example. But rather, right, we have this entire system, call it what you want, call it Wall Street, call it capitalism, call it the concept of money itself that we've all collectively agreed to, but it's still just a concept, right? At the end of the day, the $100 bill is still a piece of cloth and some green ink. Right? But we've all decided collectively that it has a value. It's no longer one person that's pushing those concepts and those practices and those laws in a particular direction. It's a whole system, right? And the system, especially if you look at the system capitalism, even in a very cursory way, you see immediately that it is also experiencing dukkha, that capitalism itself is perennially, persistently dissatisfied, right? By its very structure. And in order to be happy, in order to feel good, right, capitalism has to constantly grow. And so David Loy invites us to see how this puts us in a situation where we end up in hustle culture, commodifying all of our interests, right? We end up with billionaires who are just exploiting, everybody they can to get as much as they can. But at what point do I benefit from? Because what I care about is not right and wrong, but what I care about is what is beneficial and what is unbeneficial. What works? Does it make sense for me to hate the billionaire or hate the leader of the imperialist colonizing country? I mean, maybe temporarily that ad hominem, like to the man rage has a catharsis to it, maybe. Maybe it's also just watering the seeds of anger and hate in me, training me to be hateful. Up for debate. But for sure, it doesn't work, right? No amount of hating the people that are pulling the strings in this greedy, ever consuming, insatiable economic system doesn't help. And it doesn't help. It's the same when I look at ill will, right? I was in the military, and so I know a lot about how ill will, right, has become institutionalized as the military industrial complex. Like, I don't consider myself a monster, right? I don't consider myself immoral, and yet, because of where I was born, right, as a child of immigrants into a life of poverty in New York City and the Bronx, because I didn't feel like I had a lot of options, because I felt bad about myself, because I'm Latino and so didn't fit in with the Caucasian culture that seems to have more sway over my society than my Latino culture. Like, for all of these reasons, right, it seemed to make sense to me, it seemed to be healthy to me for my life to join the military. But what was I really doing, right? I was joining this machine, right, the military industrial complex, that's designed to kill and destroy. I'll never forget, I was a radio operator in the Marine Corps, in the United States Marine Corps. I was on a training operation where a group of helicopters were practicing the violent seizure of an enemy airport along a coastline. And as the radio man, it was my job to be standing next to the captain, to the officer in charge of this operation. And just as we landed, like just as things started getting crazy, we were informed via radio that there were some hostages being held inside of the airfield, and that part of our mission on this day was going to be to extract them alive. And I remember looking at the officer that I was working, operating the radio for, and I just said it out loud. I just said, like, sir, like, how's that possible? Like, we just spent years training to land at an airport and kill everyone here. Like, how are we going to extract these 12 people alive? We just don't know how to do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to kill them too. And I expected some paradigm shifting answer from him, this guy in charge. And instead, he just looked at me and shook his head. And he was like, oh, I agree. Yeah, let's just hope they never actually send us to do that. And as you can imagine, you know, young, I don't know what, 21-year-old me, I'm in my 50s now. And so this was a long time ago. Young Dave Kenneally was just horrified. All of a sudden, I got like sick to my stomach, you know, just, oh God, like I couldn't pretend anymore that I was something more than a blunt instrument in another man's hand. But like, was that entirely my fault? Should I have been hated and vilified? Or was I just sucked up into a system that had normalized some very extreme perspectives and behaviors that had created good versus bad, put us, right, as in that case, as American military members on the side of right and democracy, right, and put whoever we were pointed at, because that's what we were, right, it was a directable, destructive force, on the other side of that track, on the other side of that fence, on the other side of the line of right and wrong. And so David Boy is very clear that it doesn't take an individual anymore to hold a lot of ill will. It's a system now, right? In our case, if you're American, or it doesn't really matter because you're affected by the American imperialist machine wherever you are in the world, you know, we have 750 plus overseas military installations right now. 750 American military bases all over the world, outside of the United States. That's institutionalized ill will. I can't convince one person to have a different view and make that go away anymore. That's not how that works. I can't convince one king to change his mind. And then the third poison, delusion, probably the most important one, because delusion is at the base of ill will and greed. I only practice or act or behave out of greed or ill will because I suffer from delusion, because I'm misinformed. I mean, delusion is misinformation, propaganda, right? Synonyms, is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? We're all glued to, myself included, these supercomputers and screens that are, making ad revenue and shifting political influence, public opinion by propagandizing every second of our time that they can. Delusion has also become this massive, institutionalized beast. And I can't just point the finger at the anchorman or the news reporter or the particular politician. Well, they're all inside of this system that is normalizing a great deal of delusion, a great deal of dishonesty. But the people that are doing it, right, they're not like uniquely insane, even though they look it, John Lennon style, like they look it to the vast majority of us. They're just in a slightly different position inside of the system that we're in. If I was a congressman, I'd probably doing some sneaky, shady, dishonest stuff to maintain the facade of our falsely democratic government as well. I'd probably do everything I could because that'd be my job. Just like when I was a Marine, I was doing everything I could to be the most destructive force that I could be because that was my job. Not that we get an entire pass as individuals. At a certain point, the rubber does meet the road, and I have to try as best I can to take responsibility for my own actions. But that doesn't change the fact that I didn't choose to be born into this body, a male, the child of immigrants in poverty, in an empire like the United States. Like, I didn't make any of those choices. Like, I'm shaped by all that stuff. And David Loy invites us to take a step back from everything that's happening and see how what we're really looking at is collective greed, ill will, and delusion. Collective delusion. And I find this lens very helpful because I've spent a lot of time hating, being really angry, outraged, morally disappointed in people. But hate doesn't work. The Buddha was very clear in the book, the Dhammapada, which means the book of the way, a collection of the Buddhist teachings that I love, because every tradition in the world, right, Tibetan, Korean, Japanese, Indian, all the different mindfulness practitioners that align with the term Buddhism all around the world all agree like, these are the teachings. This is the Dharma. Right? The collection of teachings in the Dhammapada and the Book of the Way. And in there, it's very clear. It says hate is never dispelled by hate. Hate is only dispelled by love. This is the way, ancient and inexhaustible. And so David Loy is giving us a chance to take a step back and recognize like, okay, well, it's normal that I would feel some hate. It's normal that I'm really upset. This is not going the way I want it to go. This is not going societally in a way that's in keeping with my values. But the beneficial view, the way that's actually going to help it is to depersonalize that a lot. Right? And to look at these systems that we're all a part of and we're all contributing to. Every time we pay our taxes, every time we buy something, every time we use social media, right? We're contributing to this system. I was in a talk, and I'll end this talk with this teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh himself. I was in a question and answer one time with Thich Nhat Hanh. This was like probably around 2007. So one of the Bushes was president at the time. So there's like about 1,000 people in this meditation hall asking Thai questions. And somebody asked a question about then President Bush that was pretty unflattering and pretty snarky towards that president. And because the, vast majority of the 1,000 people in the room were probably politically aligned in some way that was not, on the side of whatever you want to call it, in the club of then President Bush, this snarky question got a lot of laughs. Right? The 1,000 people, I'm at the back of the room and I'm watching this 1,000 people kind of leaning forward, ha, 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 slapping their thighs, laughing as the question asker made fun of the president. And Ty laughed too. I remember he laughed. He smiled and kind of laughed. And then when the room went quiet, he got a very serious look on his face. And he said, just to be clear, I hope you don't dislike the president that you have. He said, I hope you don't think that there's something wrong with the president you have. He said, you have exactly the president that you deserve. He said, if you want a different president, if the United States wants a different leader, well, then it has to be a different country. Right? The leader doesn't shape the country chooses the leader. Right? The country creates the leader. And so he took that animus, that hate, that finger pointing, and he just turned it right back on us and said, no, the way out is in. Take responsibility. How are you contributing? And what can you do differently? Because you can't get these other people to change, not in short order, right? But I have some amount of control over myself and the people in my life every single day. And I can make the United States, where I stand, a place of compassion and love. I can't do very much about what's happening in Wall Street or in the White House, But right here, if I'm in the room, love and understanding is in the room. And that I can do. That I can do. It's a cold bucket of water, that teaching. I dunk it on myself regularly. Yeah. I think I'll stop there. Thank you all so much for listening. So now I'd like to break up into some small groups, and Mary's going to use her wizardry and make this happen. We're going to go into groups of 3 or 4 for just about 8 minutes. I would like to give everybody 2 minutes of time to share. And so once you drop into the room, just go for it. I'll let you popcorn style figure out who shares first. And then whoever shares first, you pick the person who shares next. So if Will shares first in his breakout group, then he would say, okay, Bernie, you're next. That way we don't waste a lot of time waiting for people to bow in, right? It just happens quickly. And I'd like you to use those 2 minutes to share with the group about which of these 3 poisons, greed, ill will, or delusion, right, feels the most alive for you. Feels the most alive for you right now. It's a similar way to saying, like, why are you here? Because you're here because one of these things is really bothering you. Maybe all of them. So we could reframe the question even like, you could be anywhere in the world right now. Why are you here? Why are you here? And as I said, these breakout room will not be recorded. So what you share will just be private between you and your little group of 3 or 4. Mary, we're ready to drop into those groups whenever you're ready. Thank you so much. We'll see you all in 8 minutes. Everybody's coming back slowly now from the breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had fun hanging out with each other, hearing each other's hearts. So now I'd like to open the floor for any questions that you might have on what we've talked about so far. If you'd like to ask a question, you can use the Zoom interface to quote unquote raise hand, and Mary will invite you to unmute. And if you're off camera for some reason and would like to ask a question via audio only, that's very welcome. Just use that same Zoom interface to quote unquote raise hand, and you'll be invited to unmute. So the floor is open. I see we have a hand. It's nice to start your share with your name and where you're joining us from. Mary is inviting you to unmute right now.
Okay, I'm Kathleen, and I'm joining you from Long Island. And this is so hopeful to me. This is just like, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, oh, I'm just in this hate head. I I have to hate and fight. And just to understand that I can be in love. I can do that, as you said, just where I am, just in my tiny little part of this country. But what I don't understand, what maybe you could help me, I have this like knee-jerk reaction when I see these people being tortured and thrown to the ground, and this person saying, hit them harder, or just lying. I have this knee-jerk reaction to like hate him and think, when are you going to die? I am like, so I'm just throwing that lovely little tidbit out there.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's a beautiful question and a brave sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm reminded of the teachings of one of my decades-long teachers, a Zen nun named Sherry Huber. And I'll never forget, I received a blog one time from Sherry Huber, who's very Zen. She sends it out once every whenever. And it was just this short little passage where she explained how important a day in her personal mindfulness practice it was when she realized that she was prejudiced against prejudiced people. Right? And this is the challenge for all of us. Right? We have the same humanity, the same dukkha, the same persistent dissatisfaction, the same greed, ill will, and delusion and capacity for those things, for those poisons inside of us that everybody does. And so we have to and get to, right, experience exactly what Kathleen is describing, right? Experience ill will to come up, for example, and to look inside of our own hearts and be like, whoa, what am I going to do with that? Where's that coming from? How is that best understood and therefore managed, therefore cared for, and therefore learned from? We're going to talk about this more in our next section when we go deeper into what engaged Buddhism is. Because Kathleen, this is what engaged Buddhism is. Is taking that finger that we're wagging and pointing it at us, not in a blaming, self-attacking, gaslighting way, not in the way we're being encouraged to when we're being lied to that recycling plastic is possible and feasible and a solution to the problem of plastic pollution in the world. That's a lie. And we're being gaslighted professionally by, massive international propaganda campaign, to get us to put the bottle in a different bin when we know that less than 10% of that plastic ever gets recycled. That's a scam. So I'm not saying that we should start gaslighting ourselves and blaming ourselves for these, in a totality way for these problems, but rather, I'm just talking about what works, right? The hate, no matter how much I can justify it, just doesn't work. That way doesn't work. Just the way, because of my background, I spent, the first half of my life like a hair's breadth away from extreme violence. I grew up in the Bronx in the 70s. I went into the Marine Corps infantry after that. And at a certain point in my 20s, when I moved into the world of yoga, which I became a yoga instructor and a yoga therapist working with people at end of life before I became a Buddhist monk in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. But at a certain point, about halfway through my life so far, I had to recognize, I had to admit and lovingly accept that the path I was on, the way I was trying, which was so full of hate and violence and othering and judgment, it just wasn't working. It wasn't improving the world around me, and it wasn't helping me. And so I started seeking, I started looking, we are in this miraculous state that the Buddha called a precious human birth. And what he meant by that was we could have been born in Gaza, right? We could have bullets flying overhead and bombs dropping on us and be starving to death right now. And if that was the case, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have the resources and the time and the safety, right? We would just be fighting for our lives as they are. We also could have been born billionaires, right? And with so much comfort and so much false security and safety, right? That flies in the face of our true interconnectedness, that we too might be pretending that the destruction of the planet was someone else's problem and that it was okay for us to benefit from. Right? But instead, right, of being born with too much suffering or too little to be inspired to follow the way and seek this path, we have been born, as the Buddha described, with a precious human birth, where we have just enough suffering that we're here. That this matters to us. But we also have enough beneficial causes and conditions that we're here. That we're here. And so it's not easy, the precious human birth. It's quite painful. I'm in pain when I wake up in the morning and think about the children in cages at the southern border of my country, of my homeland. That hurts. But I'm also very grateful for the privilege of feeling that pain, for getting to learn from that pain, getting to be directed and focused by that pain. Thank you, Kathleen. Maybe one more question, and then I'd love for us to take a break. Oh, we have a hand. Mary's inviting you to unmute.
Dear Sangha, Bernie, and Washington. And I think mine, Dave, is more of a request. If you could honor it, and if not, it's okay. There is a poem that I know that we've talked about in Sangha and is very well known. When Thai came to speak to a global community when Vietnam was, being ravaged by war. I love poetry and music that's connected to the practice because it just cut through, and I think it's very like kind of connected. And so my request is, I can't remember the name of the poem, but where Thai spoke, it makes me cry to even think about it, about where he talks about the pirate and all that we could be. Call me by my true name. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. And so, I don't know, I've been thinking about it. And if there is any time, or if you could throw it in the chat, what a wonderful gift. Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful request, Bernie. I know and love that poem as well. And I'll either read it at the end of the workshop if there's time, or I'll make sure to include it in the resource page. But for those of you that are not familiar with the poem, perhaps I'll just take Bernie's suggestion as an invitation to talk about the essence of it and like why we love it so much. It would be difficult for most of us to put into any kind of real context the scope, the real width and breadth of the suffering that the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh got to experience in his lifetime. The very first book that he published, of the now more than 100 books our teacher has published, the very first one was called Vietnam, a lotus in a sea of fire. A lotus in a sea of fire. Because that's what he was experiencing, right? In the 40s and the 50s, Vietnam was brutally oppressed and colonized by the French. And so Thai, as we call Thich Nhat Hanh, which just means teacher, Thai grew up watching his fellows being harassed, tortured, and even killed by the French imperial occupation. And then that transitioned into all of the violence that the United States imperial forces perpetrated inside of the borders of Vietnam and Cambodia, etc. This is what he knew. And so because he saw so much raw horror and was applying these practices, these teachings to it, this science of the mind, he was able to see, as he illustrates in this beautiful poem called Please Call Me by My True Names, that when somebody out there seemingly, right, is committing some horrible atrocity, like, he can connect. He can see himself in them, right? Just like if you'd grown up poor, looking over your shoulder in a dangerous place like the Bronx, you might have joined the Marine Corps infantry, right? You might have decided that it was really important to you to be safe because the world might seem as violent and dangerous as it did to teenage me. And this is the poem that Bernie brings up is just that, is Thai going through all of these people committing atrocities, all of these people having atrocities committed to them. And he just keeps saying over and over again that he sees himself in them. Well, yeah, this is our practice. The Dharma teacher in our tradition, John Bell, out of Boston, has a beautiful gatha. The word gatha, G-A-T-H-A, means a poem for practice. And the teacher, John Bell, has given us a beautiful gatha just in the last several years. And it goes like this. This is my home. These are my people. Right? And so he's inviting us as we see this atrocity, this horror, this immorality, this violence, this greed, this lie told, that we over and over again be reminding myself, well, that's happening. That's real. But it's happening in my home. And it's being perpetrated by and against my people. I'm not disconnected from this. Because we operate differently when things are in our home, right? I don't walk past a spill in my own home. I get down on my hands and knees and I clean it up. I don't stand there yelling and blaming, the imaginary spiller. This is what Thai is pointing us to. Thank you, Bernie. Whew. All right, my friends, that was a lot. That was already a lot. We started off with a bang. So let's take a 10-minute break right now. During the break, you're going to be really tempted to think about everything that just happened, right? And everything that was just said, and what you said, and what your breakout group said, and what I've been saying, what Mary has shared. That's okay. That's totally normal. It's totally natural. But as much as you can, I invite you for the next 10 minutes to, every time you notice that, to set that down. And just set it down. Just set it down. And for the next 10 minutes, try to take care of your body, of the animal that you brought to this workshop, as much and as lovingly as you possibly can. Is it bio break that you need? Is it a refresh of your beverage? Is it a snack? Is it a stretch? Is it stepping outside? You know. Your body knows. But we have so much time to think about all this stuff. Let's take a break and just be with our bodies for 10 minutes. That's what I'm going to do too. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice 10 minutes with your body. When Thich Nhat Hanh was alive, and he would give a talk, he would very often begin with instructions on how to listen. Because the listening is in and of itself a practice. Receiving the Dharma is a meditation. He would invite us to think of ourselves as a thirsty soil, arid lands, and to hear his words, to hear the teachings coming, falling on us like rain. He would remind us that the most effective way to receive this rain was not to try to memorize it, or to try to figure it all out, or to write it all down. This is being recorded anyway. But rather, to just relax, let it happen, and to trust that the rain of the Dharma was going to seep down and get to and nourish the roots, the places inside us that need it the most. I always love the generosity of that invitation, right? He was basically telling us, while I'm talking, I invite you to rest. That's going to be the most effective strategy. And so let me echo that now and say, like, as I talk now about Thai and his teachings of engaged Buddhism, his coining of the phrase engaged Buddhism, and what that means and what he meant and what that means for us, I invite you to rest. Just let these words and these teachings that I'm going to be passing along land on you like rain. So as a young Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh's country, the country of Vietnam, was on fire around him. On fire with war, destruction, with greed, ill will, and delusion. And at a certain point, early in his monastic career, he stood up proverbially in the monastery and looked around and addressed his elders and said, like, what are we doing? Why are we hiding here inside of the walls of this monastery while our country burns? Why are we out there helping? And he got the answer you'd expect, right, from traditional Buddhist monks and nuns at that time. And they were like, whoa, whoa, young whippersnapper. That's not what we do. That's not what this is. We practice here inside of the monastery and maintain the tradition and offer teachings, and the people out there deal with that. And Thai said, okay, that may work for you, but that doesn't work for me. I'm going out there. I'm going to go help. And he called this helping engaged Buddhism. Prior to him, the Chinese had a term for it that simply meant Buddhism in the world, right? And for our purposes, because we practice in a secular manner, we can just say mindfulness in the world. Mindfulness in the world. And so he stepped out into this country that was on fire in conflict with the United States and started what we would call a Peace Corps. He called it at the time the School of Youth for Social Service. The School of Youth for Social Service. What he did was gather up all these energized young people who wanted to do something because their country was being destroyed. And he taught them how to be social workers. And he sent them to these burned out villages to help them rebuild, to help them to heal. And what tools did he give them? He gave them the tools of mindfulness, right? Of love and understanding. And he called this engaged Buddhism, right? Buddhism in the world, mindfulness in the world. His practice is very simple, and it only has a few steps. And the first one is the most important. It's coming home to oneself. Coming home to oneself. Because if my world, as it is now, right, is on fire, guess what? That means I'm on fire. I don't get to experience that in some separate way, right? Isn't science tell me that as soon as I observe something, I am changing it, I am participating in its present moment co-creation and in its becoming? I'm connected to all of this. Thich Nhat Hanh called this interbeing. It's not that I am and you are. It's not that we are and they are. This whole us versus them duality that we've been herded into for nefarious reasons by fellow victims of the institutionalization of the three poisons. It doesn't work like that. When I got out of the military, I dove into yoga because I was looking for more peace. I was so angry. I'm so mad. And yoga helped, right? It was my first coming home, right? When I'm standing on one foot in a yoga pose, practicing a one-legged balance. Why am I doing that, right? Why am I putting myself in that physically challenging, emotionally somewhat stressful, all right, if I'm wobbling, potentially even embarrassing that situation if I'm in a crowded yoga class and I think I'm going to fall off my right leg? Why am I doing that? I'm doing that so that in the safety of that container, of that safe island that is my yoga mat is a place of non-judgment. My yoga mat is a place where practice does not make perfect, but where practice is perfect. Practice is perfect on my yoga mat. Well, that's an axiom from a group of wonderful teachers that call themselves the circus yogis, and that combine the teachings of yoga, of non-harm, of truthfulness, of service, with the clowning of circus. And they call themselves circus yogis. And one of their axioms is practice is perfect. Now, can you hear the non-violence in that? And so when I throw down my yoga mat, I am reminding myself that I create for myself a place of non-judgment. And then I intentionally produce some suffering, right? Standing on one leg as the example, in that safe container, so that I can do what? So that I can look right at it. The bucket of cold water. Right? And I can breathe and I can look at my fear, at my ego, at my vanity, at my shame, at my insecurity. Right? Over and over and over again. Right? This is step one of Thai's teachings of engaged Buddhism, is picking up a practice. This is one. Yoga is another. There are many, right? But picking up a collection of practices that gets you to that place, that sends you in that direction of cultivating for the rest of your life, over and over and over again, every single day, a safe island right here inside of you, place where it's okay to feel anything, place where it's okay to be really angry, be really scared, place where it's okay to be a human being. That's step number one. Right? And so once we've picked up that practice, whatever it is for us, right, we've begun. And then with all of those tools and with all of that practice and all of that training and all that beauty, right, then step two, Thai invites us to then go to somebody else. Ideally, the people closest to us, our partners, our coworkers, our family, our roommates, our neighbors, our pets. I know, whoever's right there, reach out. You can probably grab somebody. Right? And that's your first Sangha. That's your first beloved community. That's your first family of practice. And Thai doesn't suggest exactly that we start proselytizing to them, that we start brainwashing them to practice the same way as we do. Because as I think we all well know, especially if we've come from other organized attempts at a cohesive morality, choosing my words very carefully just for fun. Well, we know that that way doesn't work. Right? I can't get people to behave a certain way under threat or indoctrination, not for the long term, not in a deep way, not successfully. But what I can do is practice, let's say, for example, because what are we talking about when we talk about love? Right? We're talking about the Buddhist version, the mindful definition of the word love is actually huge. It's 4 infinite things combined, is what love is in our practice. Right? Infinite joy, infinite compassion, infinite kindness, and infinite upeksha, an ancient Sanskrit word that means in English the combination of inclusivity and equanimity that we practiced in our opening meditation. Inclusivity and equanimity, soft front and a strong back. So love is all of those things, right? Joy, compassion, kindness, inclusivity, equanimity. If I start practicing that way, if I start treating myself and the people around me that way, people are going to notice. People are going to feel it. They can feel the difference. I remember getting an incredible teaching from a fellow practitioner who had a job in this enormous, sprawling, like I got to drive around it in a truck factory, like that big a plant. And his job was to be a UPS driver, essentially, but inside of this massive factory. And so he was delivering things all day, but to the same like 10 or 15 places. And 6 months into this work, he hated it. He felt like a robot. He felt completely disconnected. He had not become friends with or gotten to know any of these people because he was just handing them a package and walking back out. That was his job. But because this man was such a deep Zen practitioner, Instead of trying to change them or even the circumstance in some external way, instead of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, he looked within and he said, well, let me conduct an experiment here. What would it be like? What would happen if right before I walked into each of these buildings with this package in my hand, I came home to myself, I got in touch with my own heart, and I set the intention to non-verbally communicate love to the people I'm about to interact with. And so he started doing this all through his workday. He would stop right on his side of the door, he would hold the package, and he would drop into love, into joy, kindness, compassion, inclusivity, and equanimity. He didn't do a whole song and dance. He didn't try to strike up conversation, right? He didn't chat GPT icebreakers. Right? He just started loving. And then he would walk in, just as he had done before, he would put the package on the desk and walk on. It only took, as he told it, a matter of just a couple of months before people started physically stopping him, being like, hey, man, how's your day? Like, how you doing? Asking him about himself. And then they started spontaneously just sharing about their selves. And he'd come in and they'd be like, oh, man, I'm having a great day, or I'm having a tough day, or, oh, this is what's on my heart. He wasn't doing or saying anything differently, but they could feel, right? They could feel the connection. So this is step 2. Thich invites us to connect with the people around us, right? From that place of our own practice. And then when they get curious and they start asking, like, how come you're so calm when everybody's so mad all day? You know, how come you're smiling when everybody else is clenching their jaw? You know, then you can start to share a little bit of your practice with them. They'll come to you. They'll come to you. And then the third and final step is, once you have that little Sangha of you and 1 or 2 or 3 other people, right, then you have this tremendous power to share the practice. Right? 2 people practicing together is not double as radiant, it's 1,000-fold as radiant. Just feels different. It just feels different. It just spreads more quickly. It's more infectious. It has more handholds. It's more palatable. It's easier to see. It's easier to understand. It's easier to mimic. And so those are the 3 steps that Thich illuminated for us. It's very simple. Come home. Then from that place of love and understanding and self-acceptance, connect with the people around you. Love them. And then together, you can love lots of others. You can love hundreds, thousands, or billions of people if you need to. Part of why we need this is biological. You know, up until very recently in human history, we wandered around in groups of about 150. Those were the people you knew. Those were the trials and tribulations, right? The joys and sufferings of humanity that you knew for your whole life. It's only very recently that I have this box in my pocket, or more likely these days in my hand, right? That is informing me through this twisted funhouse mirror of ad marketing and propaganda, right? Of the suffering and joy, right? Of billions of people. That's really, really new in the scale of our evolution. Right? The animal that sits here before you, the nervous system that sits here before you, is not designed for that, right? It's designed to know the comings and goings of about 150 humans. And so how do we reconcile that? What is the bridge that helps us to love all these nameless, faceless people all over the world? It's training a community like this. I start first, right, loving my partner, and then I come to Sangha and I see a complete stranger at first, you know, on the other side of the screen, or much better in person. Please be practicing in-person Sangha if you can. And if you can't, I got you. Sangha Ocean Beach meets every Sunday from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time via Zoom. come hang out with us. But that's only second to your in-person practice. And very slowly, it happened with Mary and I 25 years ago, right? You practice together with somebody and you start to see their real heart. Right? And Mary was facilitating the Rock Blossom Sangha in Park Slope, Brooklyn, that I am a child of, that my practice is a child of. I was seeing this beautiful soul Sunday after Sunday, like sitting there in love, in acceptance, in honesty, in all her fallibility. Very quickly, maybe a year in, I was like, oh man, this is not okay. Like, I need to be friends with this person. And I tapped her on the shoulder and I invited her to coffee. We've been friends ever since. This is the way. That's engaged Buddhism. Where it leads, right? It starts here, but where it leads is community, is the Sangha. There are many luminaries who are disciples of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. He affected the lives of millions of people on the planet. One of my favorite ones is the late Joanna Macy. If you're not familiar with her, I highly recommend looking her up and literally reading anything she has written. Doesn't matter. Just buy the book. Doesn't matter. And I got a teaching from her one time that was so clear. And she was talking to a group of people that were distressed about the state of the world, as we are. And at the end of 3 days with them, she closed by saying, the time for individual heroes is behind us. We don't have time for that anymore. If you don't know what to do, look around you and scan your environment for somebody who looks like they do. Go over to them and grab a hold of them, link arms with them, and help them doing the thing they're doing to help. And then along the way, you'll find something you're really excited to do too. But don't try to go it alone anymore. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I think this is at the core of Thay's teaching on engaged Buddhism. At the end, he's sending us here. He's sending us to community. He's sending us to Sangha. He's sending us to practice as a human family. The only way out of all of this manufactured separation, because it's not natural to us. The only way out of all this manufactured separation is to practice as family. And that's hard, right? I'm not biologically hardwired for that. I'm biologically hardwired to be violently suspicious of strangers. That's what this animal is, right? I'm a 99.6% chimpanzee. Chimpanzees kill a chimpanzee they don't know when they encounter each other in the jungle. That's their instinct. I have a lot of that in me. You have a lot of that in you. So we have to train like this, right? We have to train. The last thing I'll say is one of my favorite teachings from Thay. When I was first encountering him, I started reading some of his incredibly insightful and poetic books. He's such a phenomenal writer. And the first one that really grabbed me was called Anger, Wisdom for Cooling the Flames. And when I saw it on the shelf in the Barnes & Noble in New York City, I was angry. I was on fire. I needed some flame cooling. So I bought it. And in there, he tells this incredible story where he has you, the reader, picture yourself. Let's do it all together now. Picture yourself sitting in your own home. You're just sitting there in your living room, minding your own business. And boom, somebody kicks down your door, right? Busts open your front door and throws in a fiery bomb and then runs out. And so now you're sitting there, an explosion has happened, a fire has been started, and the perpetrator is running down the street. He invites you to picture yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, your body in that circumstance. And he says, like, you may have the instinct in that moment to jump up and chase after that person, right? You may be so mad at them. You may be so outraged that they would do such a terrible thing, that they would commit such an atrocity, that you might want to track them down and yell at them or punish them or imprison them or force them to explain their actions. He says, that's a natural instinct. That's going to happen. But then he reminds us, every step you take running down the street as you chase them, your house is burning behind you. Your house is on fire. And it doesn't make sense to chase that person until you address the larger problem, until you put out the fire. Doesn't make sense to chase the other person until you can put out the fire in your own house. So just in that same way, it doesn't make sense to be pointing the finger all day and all night, yelling back at the box in my hand or at the box on the wall. My house is on fire. I got to take care of that first. As Thai like to say it, peace in oneself, peace in the world. If I want there to be peace in the world, it has to start right here on this meditation cushion. It has to start right here in this body. If I want the future to hold something, if I really passionately want the future to contain something like, say, kindness or compassion or inclusivity or justice, if I really want the future to have something, the only way I can ensure that is by being it now, right? By cultivating it now with the actions of my own life. That's the only guarantee. Peace in oneself, peace in the world. Thank you so much for listening. So I'd like to open it up for questions again. Let's do at least 10 minutes, maybe more. I want to hear how that lands for you. I want to hear anything you didn't understand or that makes you feel uncomfortable. Well, some of these teachings are bitter pills. And I understand that. So I'm open to hear anything that you're experiencing right now. And here to answer any questions you may have. The floor is open. We have a hand. Mary, we'll invite you to unmute. It's nice to start your question with your name and where you're joining us from.
My name is Jeannie, and I'm from Fairhaven, Massachusetts. So I have an opportunity to share some of this, which I'm not hugely good at, but I have an opportunity to share about mindfulness at my church on the Sunday after Christmas. It's a day that we don't normally have a service, but they ask people to do sort of offhand things that might be interesting. So my question is, I get the impression from our 30-second meditation that we do in our services, it's a U church, that people are afraid to let the snow globe settle. They don't want to be quiet for 5 minutes or 2. And how to begin, of course, by breathing and feeling calm and then feeling ease. But just from all your experience, what's the best way to start helping people let the snow globe settle? Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. Appreciate you. first I want to agree with in my personal anecdotal experience and normalize what Jeannie is describing. I completely agree. You know, when I first started teaching people yoga, for example, I couldn't believe like how difficult it was for them to concentrate. Um, when you're teaching a yoga class and you say something simple like, you know, lift your hands up to the sky, you get to see, you know, 50 people respond to that in 50 different ways. And some of them, you know, put their hands up in the sky as you're instructing, and some of them start looking around at what other people are doing. You know, some of them get really nervous, do something the opposite of what you've just instructed. You know, some of them freeze. So the more time you spend doing that, the more you see how high-strung, negatively biased, fearful, and self-concerned human beings are biologically, right? We have this funny perspective that everybody's kind of looking at us, and that they're doing it with a very negative lens. And so it's terrifying to be our real selves, to let loose, to say what's really on our minds, to even ourselves experience what we're really thinking. Oh, I saw this even more clearly when I worked with people that were dying or going through cancer treatment. I used to run a clinic for the American Cancer Society where I taught yoga teachers how to work with people that were at end of life or going through life-threatening cancer treatment. And if God forbid I invited one of those people, one of those patients, to sit with their thoughts, for example, they would usually burst into tears, right? Because what were they sitting there thinking about? They were sitting there thinking about dying and how they didn't want to die. You know, the realities of what's going on inside of us are very extreme. You know, modern neuroscience indicates that we're having roughly 60,000 thoughts a day. 60,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot. It's overwhelming. And so when people first sit down, this was the case for me, and try to observe that, they usually get very overwhelmed. They can get very scared. They can feel really destabilized. I thought I was going a little crazy when I first started coming home to myself, because I hadn't been trained. I hadn't been educated that my mind is just a thought-producing machine, and that it was chaotic and amoral and self-contradicting. Right? I thought I was having a cohesive, rational experience in my mind, but that's not the case. That's not the case. And then, of course, when we first tried to invite people to sit and to let the snow globe settle, Jeannie, they very often misunderstand our instruction and think that we're saying, so I want you to sit down and close your eyes and stop thinking. Right? And they sit there and they try that, you know, as if I can close my eyes and stop my heart from beating. I don't have that capacity. That's not what this is. Right? So I can't close my eyes and stop my thought-producing organ from producing 60,000 thoughts a day. I don't have that ability. What I can do, as the old Zen teaching goes, is if I walk up to the disturbed, muddy pond that a frog has just dumped into, I cannot take my hand and smooth out the surface of it. And I can't do anything to make it still and to give me that clarity and that reflection that I may desire from the pond. And all I can do is wait. Then I can sit next to the pond and I can wait and not disturb it still further. And then eventually the snow globe will settle. Right? And so I think, to answer Jeannie's question, the most important thing, especially when introducing the raw beginner to a moment of self-awareness in loving attention, a moment of mindfulness, is that we have to prepare them for this. And we have to normalize this. We have to be like, don't think that your brain is going to shut down right now. I'm not inviting you to 2 minutes of a lobotomy. That's not what's about to happen. What's about to happen is the opposite. You're going to quiet down your movements and your activities and your plans, and you're going to get a kind of a startling look at where you're really at. And it might even be jarring at first, and maybe the 100th time you do it, it will start to feel calming. But that's not how it's going to feel in the beginning. Right? And then they might ask you, well, Jeannie, why are you going to do this to us? Why are you going to disturb me in this way? And you're going to say, because eventually, right, if you continue to do this work in this safe environment, right, here in your church pew, you're going to develop over time the capacity when something goes really wrong and it's really up in your face to breathe with it and to not resist it and other it and judge it or immediately try to numb or anesthetize yourself to it with media or alcohol or overwork, mindless activity. You're going to have the capacity at some point in the future to have the difficult thing arise and to sit with it. And then that difficult thing transitions from being your enemy to being your teacher, to being your lighthouse, to being your guidepost, to being your friend. But yes, Jeannie, they do need that support. They do need that extra layer of educational preparation. Yeah, I need it too. I forget. And I'll be having a tough day and sit down and think, I'm going to calm myself down right now. I need to breathe. And I'll just feel even more emotional. I forget that that's what the practice is. The practice is not anesthesia. It's the opposite. It's an increase in sensitivity. Yeah. Thank you for your question. I think we'll take one more question and then have a little break. We have a hand.
Hi, Brother Dave. Hi, Sangha. Bridget bowing in from Ocean Beach, California. I just want to share my appreciation with you, sharing the story of the delivery man and how he changed his practices. It's such a great reminder. I find myself sometimes working 12-hour shifts at the hospital without even taking a deep breath or coming back to my center. And so just such a good reminder for that practice. And I'm wondering where and when you practice this in your day-to-day life, how you find yourself practicing this, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book called The Art of Power. And of his 100 books, it's the one that's sort of for the CEO, for the leader. And in it, he defines what he calls true power. And he says it very simply. The more my actions, and in mindful practice, when we talk about actions, we're talking about thoughts, speech, and actions of deed. That's sometimes called the triple karma, if you're looking for classical terms. Thoughts, speech, and actions. So Thai teaches that the more my thoughts, speech, and actions are connected to my heart's deepest intentions. The more powerful that connection is, the more powerful the action becomes. Right? The strength of the action, the wind in the sail of the action is my intention. Why can the soccer mom pick the car up off of her child? Like, where does the strength for that come from? You know? It comes from intention, right? In that moment, she cares about nothing more than her child. And so her power is near boundless. It's near boundless. You know? This is the truth that Tai is showing us. You know? And so what I'm trying to do with my life, when I make every decision I make, what to think, what to say, what to do, what to buy, what to do for a living, what media to consume, what actions to take, how to structure my life in every sense, I am always asking myself, is this choice in connection with my heart's deepest intention? So, for example, I've spent a lot of time at Buddhist monasteries. A lot. I just did 4 months at the Deer Park Monastery in Southern California this year. I did a 4-month retreat working on their Happy Farm project, helping them to start an organic food farm. And before that, I spent 5 or 6 years living in monasteries and practice centers, training to ordain as a Buddhist monk and all of that. Shaved the head, long brown robe, the whole thing. And because I've chosen to practice in that style so much, I very often get the question, either what are you retreating from with all this retreat? And I get that question a lot. What are you retreating from? Or I get the question like, what does retreat even mean? What does that mean that you're on retreat? And my answer is this. All of the things that I really care about, the stuff I wear on my heart, like this kafia symbol, reminding me that I wear the suffering of the Palestinians that are being slaughtered in Gaza right now, on my heart. Everything that I wear on my heart, everything that I really care about, my mother's health, the sanctity of nature, everything I really care about, I cannot retreat from. I cannot retreat from my own heart, my own values, my own loves. They are who I am. And so when I'm on retreat, quote unquote, at a monastery or a practice center or in my home, I am retreating from the things that distract me from what I really care about. If I'm doing this, if I'm doom scrolling, I am distracting myself from what I really care about. If I'm drinking alcohol, I am distracting myself from what I really care about. If I am lost in mindless overactivity, as the whole of society would be pushing me towards, like, oh, really? You like playing guitar? Well, why don't you start doing that on YouTube and make $100? Commodifying all of my interests, hustling 24 hours a day, right? That's all just distraction. I don't really care about that. And so that's my answer. Is that as much as I possibly can, I'm trying to make this very finite time that I have here on Earth as meaningful as I can, as powerful as I can, as intentional as I can. And that manifests itself in 100 different ways, and will manifest itself in 100 different ways still again for you. Because it's your life and your heart and your intention. We have one more hand. Maybe we'll take that question and then we'll take a break.
I wonder if I could interrupt real quick, Dave.
No interruptions. Oh, please, Mary.
because Frank, who is with Wendy from Stonehaven in Scotland, had a question but couldn't speak. And the question is I would like to ask how we love ourselves. And then perhaps we can have Will later, if that's all right.
That is okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Will, for understanding, as I know you're doing right now. Frank, how can we love ourselves? Wow. Okay, what a nice question to go into break on. Because just like everything we're talking about right now, there is no simple, rational, esoteric answer to that question that I can give you that will produce self-love. That's not available. There's no words I can say right now that will take you from a place of non-self-love to a place of self-love. I can't do that. Nobody can. Self-love, just like all of Zen, is a practice. It's a push-up. Right? It's something I have to train. If I go to the gym and I want to have a larger bicep muscle, I can't pick up something heavy and just imagine that I'm going to hold it there forever for 20 minutes and then go home and my bicep's going to be stronger. That's not how it works, right? I pick up the heavy thing and then I can't bear it anymore and I have to put it down. And then I pick it up again and I can't bear it anymore. I have to put it down. And it's that repetition, right, that strengthens the muscle. It's the exact same with the muscle of self-love. I'm hardwired to be really hard on myself, to shame and blame and abandon and criticize and myself. And so what I can do is over and over and over again, countless thousands of times a day for a lifetime, right? I can pick up again the practice of self-love. I can catch myself, I can observe myself in some type of unbeneficial, unwholesome, judgmental self-critique. For example, some societally rewarded, but in fact unbeneficial self-abandonment, like overworking and undersleeping, for example. You know, the list is so long, right? I can catch myself in the opposite of self-love, and I can smile. I'm like, whoa, you know, I like to imagine myself in the audience of my life, right? And I'm out there in the cheap seats, eating popcorn, watching Dave on the stage. And he's doing the dance of my life, right? He's paying the bills and doing the work and having the conversations and laughing at the jokes. But the real me, you know, he's the dancer, right? And the real me, the observer, is in the audience and I'm watching and I'm like, look at him go. I'm cheering him on. And when I see him being really, really hard on himself, as he does every day, let me be clear, as I do every day, I just remind him. Hey, buddy, you know, I kind of call from the audience. That way doesn't work. Take a breath. Come back. Slow down. Understand. Inquire. Accept. And then he usually will do it for, I don't know, 30 seconds. A full minute on a good day, you know, and then I might snap right back into the habit, you know, like talking to myself like, I don't know, in a way I wouldn't talk to anybody else. Let's put it that way. But the observer is still there, right? The observer is still there watching me now, being a jerk to myself. And he's sad, you know, he's eating his popcorn. He's like nudging somebody next to him, being like, this is the tragic part of this play. Yeah, this is where he really self-abandons for a while. He's going to give himself a terrible day today. Oh, let's watch. But as long as the observer is aware, right, I may be still stuck in that habit because it's so entrenched and so ingrained. And, in my case, I was physically, emotionally, sexually, economically abused. Like it's not by accident that I'm a jerk to me. I received a lot of jerk energy in my formative years. But as long as I'm watching him with love, be that jerk, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm softening. And the next time I intervene, the next time I say, hey, that doesn't work. Try taking a walk around the block. Try buying yourself an ice cream. Or in my case, try eating some potato chips. That's my comfort food. Just a small bowl. It'll be easier. And then I can tell you from experience, because I've been practicing with this for 25 years, it gets easier. 10 years ago, I was way meaner to myself. 20 years ago, I was monstrous to myself all day long. 25 years ago, I was being so monstrous to myself that I was walking around the planet with a rifle, like threatening to kill people. Like it takes time. It takes time, but it works. It works. Thank you for your question, Frank. All right, let's take another 10-minute break. During this 10 minutes, right? Right? I want you to really ask yourself, what do I need right now? What is the most loving way that I can spend the next 10 minutes? What do I really need? And then holler it at yourself from the cheap seats and see if you can get the monkey you are dancing on the stage to do some of it. 10 minutes. See you on the other side. Welcome back, friends. I hope you found a way to nourish yourself and love yourself in those 10 minutes. Mine included a shot of espresso that I don't really need. I'm so excited and energized right now, but it was delicious. Mary, I laid in my hammock. Yay! So we have a half an hour left together. Let's make it count. Let's start with a sit. Please find your comfortable seat. Let's practice together. Breathing in. I am aware that I am breathing in. Breathing out. I am aware that I am breathing out. In. Out. Noticing the wandering mind. Acknowledging and smiling at any story your mind may be telling you right now, any words, and bringing yourself back over and over again, countless thousands of times, to in, out, to this reality in the present moment. No judgment, no failure, just returning again and again. In, out. Breathing in, we are here. Breathing out, it is now. In, here. Out, now. Breathing in, we have arrived. Breathing out, together, we are home in the present moment. In, arrived, out, home. Thank you, Sangha. Feel free to stretch out and unwind, massage yourselves. Now, as we conclude our time together today, we're where the rubber meets the road. We're at the what do we do now place. And luckily, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Masters that have lived through as much, if not worse, and have left us trails of breadcrumbs to follow, wise paths to pursue. We're not alone, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Today, I selected 3 suggestions that I want to send you home with. 3 practical approaches, 3 techniques, doings that you can begin immediately. The first is a tough one for myself personally, and so I would imagine for most of you as well, is we have to take a long, hard look at our consumption of the quote unquote news. We have to accept that the vast majority of what's being packaged as news and sent to us through a variety of formats has been completely corrupted by advertising, propagandist, manipulation. Dishonesty. The vast majority of what we're calling news is a toxin and is designed to separate us instead of bring us together, to stoke fear, anger, and judgment in us instead of curiosity, inclusivity, connection. This is very difficult to face, but it is our reality. And so the first practice that I invite you to lean into is to fast from this toxin as much as you possibly can. And I imagine for many of you here, that sounds quite counterintuitive, right? Because you're like, but, I care so much. I want to participate. I want to stay connected. I want to be a good citizen. I want to help. And so I invite you to ask yourself, when you look at whatever flavor of this poison you have developed the habit of consuming, I invite you to ask yourself in the most brutal, honest way you possibly can. Yes, but is this really helping? Or is it just a hole in my tire, bleeding air, right? Depleting me of strength. I go months at a time without consuming news. And nothing changes. My world doesn't collapse. My community doesn't ostracize me. I don't die of embarrassment. All that happens is I grow stronger because I'm consuming less poison. So I want you to look really carefully at how often you consume that toxin. And when, right? Are you consuming it when you're most vulnerable? At the beginning of the day, when you first wake up? At the end of the day, right before you go to bed? You're picking up what I'm putting down. I remember the Dharma teacher, Sister Annabelle, Sister Annabelle Laity, one of the most senior monastics in our entire tradition, was asked how much news she consumed. And her answer was, oh, yeah, like I have to consume some news because I lived my entire life in the monastery where there is no poverty, where there is no hunger, where there is no violence. And she said, and so I consume at least 5 minutes of news every month. We all laughed. She said, it's always the same. It's always a story of someone who's suffering, causing another person suffering. It's like, but I like to be reminded of that. Well, that's our situation. But more than that, my friends, strong medicine. Make sure you need it. Find it in the most wholesome way you can. When I walk the supermarket, I'm looking for organic food. I'm looking for the food with the least poison in it. Find the information that has the least poison in it. Read the book before you turn on the mainstream media. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, remember the story about the practitioner delivering packages with loving intention, right? That's something we can all do right now, right? Write it in pen on the palm of your hand. This is my home. These are my people. Right? The next time you pull up to Costco and you're sitting there already angry at the world because of all the irresponsible, dangerous driving in the parking lot, because of all the gross overconsumerism and consumption, because of the traffic on the way there, because of the exorbitant cost of eggs, right? When you're sitting there in that moment, look at your palm and remind yourself, oh, this is my home. These are my people. What intention am I going to bring to these interactions? And make it love. Right now, right? Drop anchor and decide that every single person you interact with, digitally, in person, in your thoughts, that you're going to try to love and understand. Right? Set intention. Set loving intention. Yeah. Lifelong practice. Lifelong practice right there. Start today. Start today. And then number three, and according to our teacher, the most important, is Sangha, family, community. Right? Sit down and really ask yourself, what more can I do today, tomorrow, this week? Not next year, right? Right now, what more can I do to be connected to community? Does it mean in-person Sangha meetings? Does it mean coming to Sangha Ocean Beach and practicing with us online every Sunday? Woo! We got you. No. Does it mean having open and honest conversations about the state of the world with your loved ones, with your neighbors, with your coworkers, with people who maybe you don't 100% agree with? Right? You know better than me. But set your course, right? Starting right now for increasing community, more community. When I picture the more beautiful world that I know is possible, to paraphrase the book title from the thinker Charles Eisenstein, when I picture this beautiful future that I know, that my heart knows is possible, mostly what I picture is harmony. Right? And like we've said, if I want the future to have something, I have to water that thing now. I have to be that thing now. So if you want the future to be a planet of harmonious community, well, then you have to build and be a part of harmonious community now. And I can't tell you how to do that. Thich Nhat Hanh can't tell you how to do that. You're where you're at, surrounded by the people you're surrounded by. How can you connect to them more? The more you connect to them, the more you will be able to share your practice with them. The more you share your practice with them, the more they will practice. And then they will connect to people, and they will connect to people, and they will connect to people. And there you have it. That's engaged Buddhism, my friends. It's not an idea, and it's an action. It's a practice, a daily practice. Begin now. Begin today. Begin today. When you get the recording of this workshop in a few days, send it to as many people as you can. That's why we're doing this. By doing so, you are inviting them into this contemplation. You are inviting them into this practice. And we do it together. We do it together. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you. We don't have a lot of time left for questions, but I was holding that Will got bumped at the last. Will, are you good? Yeah? Okay. Was there anybody else who wanted to ask a last question? We have time for one. We have a hand.
Did the hand disappear?
Was that an authentic hand there in New York City? Yeah? Okay, I'm inviting you to unmute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for this entire day. Miraculous. This is 3 weeks in a row that I've been able to have organized day of mindfulness on a Saturday, which has been very healing for my practice and my life. And thank you for doing this. So one of the things, you mentioned consumption of toxins. So I work like a number of different offices that I'm in and out of. One of them has two people that are like very staunch, patriotic, bought into the propaganda machine, America First, Trumpians. When they talk, I normally just hush. They're both very into this idea that they are 100% right, and all the rest of us are 100% wrong. Other people do speak back. They're aware that my beliefs are very different. But there are certainly times when, I'll feel some kind of unhealthy otherness that I think of them. Certainly nothing like violent or anything, but discrimination, duality. So maybe just some steps when you're in, the reality is most of us have to have jobs where we work with people that don't think just like us or whatever. And you have any steps as far as what's healthy in that situation, as far as not feeling like you're completely giving in to like just kind of letting this bullyism keep going, and at the same time recognizing like, not my office, I'm just there to do a job and I need to get through my day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful question and a wonderful note to end on. I just accidentally invited you to unmute again. I'm messing with Mary's tech stuff. What am I doing? There are many answers to your question. We've touched on a few of them internally, right? Setting the right intention, sending them loving kindness, understanding that they are a victim of these systemic problems just as we are, taking a step back from our very natural tendency to individualize their behavior and to blame them personally for the harshness of their views and the suffering that some of their views might be causing globally. But I'll offer you another very practical tool that I love. And I got this from my friend and co-founder of Sangha Ocean Beach, Brian Foster. One of my oldest and dearest friends. Brian and I met practicing as Marines 30 years ago. And he calls the practice, because he's a dog lover and is really aware of how distractible dogs are, he calls this practice squirrel! Exclamation mark. And I watch him do it, right? He'll be hanging out with a group of people, maybe they're coworkers, maybe they're family, and he'll see the conversation start to go down a dark road, right? And a lot of shoulds, a lot of rights and wrongs, a lot of certainty. And in his deep compassion and his hard-earned wisdom, he knows that if he meets that energy head to head, if he tries to convince or change or argue or debate, that 9 times out of 10, it's not going to go well, you know? And so what he does instead is he keeps a whole bunch of positive things in his pocket. And then he just does squirrel. He just changes the subject, you know, like just very skillfully, you know, like says like, oh yeah, you know, it's funny that you bring up, you know, immigration. I just had this really beautiful experience with, you know, the Guatemalan woman who runs the flower shop that I buy flowers for my wife at. And she, you know, I've been buying flowers from her for 20 years. Like she came here from Guatemala like maybe 30 years ago. Now we're kind of family friends. And, you know, she did the flowers for our wedding and, you know, you see what I've done? Right? I'm not convincing somebody that their view that all immigration is bad and that all immigrants are criminals is wrong. I can't really do that typically. Right, but I can squirrel, right? I can slightly change the subject and bring out the positive that I have in my heart. And the next thing you know, right, somebody else picks up the thread and they tell a similar story, and the focus has moved away from the angry person who's very wounded and very traumatized and wants to argue and shout and be right. Well. And sometimes I can do that out loud, and sometimes I have to do that internally. But that's what I'll offer today, you know, squirrel practice. Thanks for your question. And thank you all so much for your presence and your practice and your sharing and your listening. We do it together, friends. You know, I'm going to send you an email later today, just thanking you. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is by inviting you to a deal if you want to come talk to me one-on-one for 45 minutes, making it inexpensive for you to do so. So if you want to go a little deeper in this, I'm going to send you an opportunity to do that. I'd love to meet you all. And of course, you can always come hang out with us on Sunday. Sangha Ocean Beach meets every Sunday, and I'll send you the information for that if you don't already have it from my website, davekenneally.com. You know, in-person Sangha is the best, but if that's not available to you right now, come hang out with us. We've been hanging out every Sunday for over 7 years. Let me tell you, it works and it feels good. And you're welcome. And then I'm going to think about what we're going to do next, you know, along these lines. I feel like we've only just begun. And so maybe we'll have another workshop in January and we'll go a step deeper. You know, why not? Why not? Thank you, friends. Thank you, Mary. You're the best. Oh, look at you go. See? Not thinking, doing. Love you, Sangha. See you again soon.